sunken into the floor. There's a dining room set that he designed that the chairs were designed to actually wall the diners from everything else. This is how he perceives space, as the family should be closed and intimate. So the sequence of prospect and refuge. In games, you see it a lot in games like Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear Solid is more or less prospect and refuge based. The idea being that Snake has to hide in some sort of refuge, as flimsy as it might be, but he's, for example, safe for the time being next to this tank. But he's got to get to these boxes without alerting this guy here. You see it a lot in games like Gears of War that implement a cover system of some sort. In Gears of War, you try to get behind walls and take out your enemies in order to get to the next bit of cover. There is a danger here, however. You don't want to do too much and have the mechanic be overutilized. So here we have Yahtzee's criticism of the levels being based entirely on chest-high walls. Tying Prospect and Refuge to mechanics can create some really interesting gameplay experiences, though. The beach in Half-Life 2 has a very interesting, Prospect and Refuge sequence where the refuges are these rocks, and the prospect is this beach area. Now the beach is inhabited by these evil bugs called antlions, and if you walk on the sand, it's the same idea if any of you have ever read Dune, where if you're walking around on the sand, the monsters can hear you, and then they will come up and eat you. That's what happens in Half-Life. So using the gravity gun, you have to pick up debris from the beach and build yourself bridges to cross the prospect space and go from rocky island to rocky island. Same thing with Mega Man. Even though it's based on a mechanic of jumping and shooting, the experience of being in tighter corridors where you have small enemies and you can jump around from block to block, fighting them, even though many of the bullets go through the level, there's still a lot of play going on with being able to dodge in around the level geometry. Meanwhile, again, the boss rooms are mostly open, save for a few exceptions. So moving on from that, the next section, and I'm going to briefly touch on it now, I will expand upon it later, but one thing that is another survival space is height. So we have a mixed relationship with height. Height can be a really safe space. Again, with Le Corbusier's Villa-Savoie, you can look down and see what all the other people are doing that are touring the building. In Team Fortress 2, if you're the sniper and you're in a high space, you've got pretty good control of the map. You can take guys out because you're in this high, safe area where you can watch what's going on below you. Height can also be really dangerous. The difference, of course, being how the height is handled. Are you on a nice enclosed little tower with a wall and with things covering you, or are you at the edge of a scary precipice? One trick that Valve employs a lot is to use vertical lines that go down into the pit that you are hanging above, and that further increases the sense of height because the lines draw the player gaze downward. Next is shadow. Shadow, for this purpose, is the lack of light caused by the light source being obscured by an object. Which seems really simple, but you'll see why I definitely want to define it that way. In addition to shadow, we also have shade. Shade obscures objects and evokes curiosity in players. So shade is a diffused light, the kind that you find in a lot of churches. So, like height, we have a mixed relationship with shadow. Shadows produce progressively scarier spaces as the player moves from light to dark. Humans don't like going from light to dark. It's weird, and there might be a bear inside. So it's generally avoided. Shadow can be used to great effect in horror games. So, like in Dead Space, where shadow builds what's called negative space, where you can't see what's around you. And the fear of the unknown is scarier than really knowing what's there. You know, if you play it correctly, anytime you have to go from light to dark, the light of the dark stops being where the monsters live, and they can be seen as the monster itself. Kind of like in the movie Paranormal Activity. When night came, the night vision was on, the demon could be anywhere. Or Jaws, where people ended up being afraid of the water rather than the shark, because the shark lurked around in the water and the people couldn't see it. Shadow can also be, if you are existing in the shadow space and have mastered it, it can also be a refuge. So the creators of Splinter Cell utilized something they call shadow space, where the shadow space was where Sam Fisher could hide from enemies. And like Batman, have the ability to take them out and then fade away back into the shadows. You find this a lot in architecture where you can move around in a shadowed area, while looking at what's going on outside. The key to this is, again, if you already have mastered that shadow space. Lastly, shadows are really useful for creating rhythms that can entice players. People move with rhythm. And I don't mean the rhythm of their actual movements, I mean if you have a set of columns, people tend to follow it. That's just how we respond to some buildings. Which ties well into the purpose of shade. Shade's middle ground of light and dark creates what's called atmospheric ambiguity. Again, it's that idea of negative space. I don't really know what's going on here, and that's interesting to me. And where the negative space of shadow makes it tense because it's black and murky and you don't know what's going on inside, the shade gives you enough information that you can weigh the risks and decide to go forward or not. And again, so like the mosque in Cordoba, the application of both shaded light and rhythm makes a person want to go further and see what's going on. One series that uses atmospheric ambiguity very well, for example, is the Zelda series, where you will walk into a large open space and it'll be kind of murky and misty and shaded, and you're like, my God, I don't know what's going to happen. Am I about to fight a boss, or am I about to get some cool new toy? Map notwithstanding. So in a lot of these games, they kind of build that tension, again, if you don't look at the map, with the nice convenient skull on the roof where you fight the monster. A lot of these spaces build sort of an anticipation of, okay, what am I about to do here? So to demonstrate some of these, I have prepared a really quick, dirty, low poly level design called the Nightmare Over Innsmouth.